Steven, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hey, your video is still off.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Ah, there I am.
Awesome. Good morning. How you doing?
Good, good, good. And let's see. Okay, now I'm lined up with my camera a little better. And there is Richard Watson. Hi, Richard. Um, uh, I just can't help reiterating, I was so impressed with your music of life. That is so profound and significant. Are you getting any traction on that? Are there any people besides crazy
So
people?
the videos have had like 1,000 views or something, but I haven't written a paper on it yet.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I wish you good fortune with that because that really is revolutionary. I had suspicions along those lines myself, because the DNA strand is like a sinky. It's so twangy and springy, and then
Yeah.
this idea of unwinding a piece of it and letting it resonate, and then those resonances then propagate. That is hats off to you on that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you're enthusiastic about it. It's like I really want resonance to be the engine of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Oh,
just how the brain works and how perception works, but not even just cognition, but it's the dynamic that creates the material forms of life.
yeah. Well, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that harmonic resonance is the organizational principle of the universe, from
Hmm.
subatomic particles all the way up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that some people would be, because the way that supersymmetry in subatomic particles explains the different kinds of particles that you can see of different kinds of harmonics.
Yes.
So that's not, there's other people that say that already. The thing is, what's the difference between harmonic resonance in inanimate matter and harmonic resonance in animate matter in living systems, right? What's the difference between those two kinds of things, and how do you turn it into an algorithm that does problem solving instead of just something that makes waves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are we meeting about today?
Well,
You
Uh,
got me one.
it's a
we're
question to Charlie,
we're
I guess. Yeah.
yeah, we're meeting about the question that Richard just asked. I mean, what I'm hoping to do with this group is just have a forum where we can bat back and forth possible mechanisms and tests we can do or things we can investigate to design tests that might get us a little closer to answering this question. And also, how do we move this project forward? Who do we network with? Who do we recruit? How do we, get funding, that sort of thing. Because I think we're sort of a core group here that's sort of seen this bigger picture and is interested in, making it experimentally viable. And so, Adam's interested in this as well. And so, as far as I can tell, the four of us are the people who are most serious about it. And so, um, yeah, I'd love for us to just get together periodically and just try and um, check each other's progress and work, and then design things. And Adam's been very generous in saying that it's possible that um, within the confines of his startup, that they can do some of the coding, or or if nothing else, just collaborate with us and help us figure out how to do the things that we're interested in testing. So, yeah. So, so, and Richard and I talked about a week ago about maybe even just making a kind of formal plan for how to move this forward and what steps we should take. But I took the liberty of making a conjecture that's incredibly not very good. But I shared it in the email. I don't know if you saw that, Stephen. Um, Pans on wire. Um,
Yes,
anyway,
yes, yes. I saw that. Right, right.
just kind of a, just
Yeah,
kind of a way of making tangible. What I want to do in this group is try to make our speculations tangible, and say like, okay, a resonator that forms a memory is like our general concept of what life is, but what specifically would that look like, and how could we model that, either like analog or digital? And you and I have talked a lot about how we feel like, analog, it's been like a resonator is an analog computer, but it also can be formalized digitally. So that makes it a lot cheaper to do experiments if we can do it
yeah,
in.
Well, yeah, I agree that it would make things much harder to do real analog computation, but I don't agree that at some level the difference will become important. I don't agree that you can abstract the analog computation into digital.
yeah, yeah. Although you saw my in my video, I do the resonances in that cube, and you know what I'm referring to, and showing
Yeah.
different modes of oscillation, and all of that is done in digital hardware, and so if we can get to that level, then I think there's a lot we can do. But I agree with you. Have you heard the term the grain problem? There's an old term in philosophy back there talking about the problem when you compare the brain to experience. There's a grain problem, like in old photography, the granularity of the resolution. This grain problem will catch you when your resonance gets to doing too much. You can't keep up with it in the digital simulation. I think that also the approach to Chladni plates, that's one direction we could go. And then the other thing is nonlinear optics and phase conjugation. I don't think that was in my video. Did you catch on to any of that? I think I talked to you about it when you came
Yeah,
to
so
visit.
this is the let me hold on. So that optics does Fourier transforms, and wait, I remember. So the way in which two beams interact with each other inside a medium creates a reflection
A warping of the medium.
that reflects light back in the direction
Reflects
that it
light
came.
back. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Can I share my screen for a bit here? I'm sharing is
You
not
should
turned
be
on.
able to. Oh, sorry. Multiple participants. Okay, yep, gotcha. You should be authorized now.
Okay, and I want to look at this one here. Can you see that? Oh, well, I have to hit share.
There we go.
Yeah.
What do you see on your screen?
Yep, we see
Two-way
it.
mixing?
Two-wave mixing. Yep.
Yeah, all right. So here it is. There's a block of glass, and most any glass will go nonlinear if it gets high enough energy. And here's a pair of laser beams, beam one and beam two, and in their zone of intersection, you see this emergence of this interference pattern, which because of the um, where am I going with this thought? And this interference pattern, if done in empty space or a vacuum, it has no effect on anything else. And Charlie is big on this idea of the trying to make a memory that creates a more substantial substance. That by doing this interference pattern inside this block of glass, it creates the system. They have this in nonlinear optics. They have this a wave, the vector diagram, where you say if beam 1 is this K1 here, and beam 2 is this one here, then the interference pattern that will emerge will be like another wave. And if a wave comes crashing into it, it will experience it as another wave. And you can tell that this pattern will come out as the solution to this vector diagram. And this here, you see that the vectors go along the beam. So this vector points this way. And then when you go to here, we have, here's just a demonstration of if you have beam 1 and beam 2. This is Bragg diffraction. So this here is now a crystal, and the crystal has layers in it that are just like those interference patterns. And if you shine this, let me skip this part and get to this part here. All right, so we started with beam 1 coming in here, and here's beam 2 coming in here. All right, so far this is K1 and K2. So this point represents K1 plus K2. And now we have a probe beam that can come from actually anywhere. But if it came in from over here, then it will bounce off and reflect. It also goes straight through, but it also bounces off and reflects in the direction of K4, because it was K1 plus K2 plus K3, and you want to make that a cycle. For example, the electron resonating inside the glass, and this solution K4 tells you what direction beam 4 will come out as. So this is the core idea. I can stop sharing here.
Does it change? Where does the memory part come in? Does it change the crystal in some fashion?
Well,
Or
no, in this case, it's not like a material memory. You could make that a block of glass that is photosensitive in such a way that when you put these beams, it will record the pattern in the glass, right? The sort of holography kind of does that. It's a photographic plate, and it records an interference pattern. And when you replicate the one beam, then the hologram will reflect the interference between the two original beams, and in that way it reproduces the original pattern. So yes, you could make it like a photographic recording, but I think the thing about the phase conjugation is it's dynamic, and that in a way, what you can look at, in electronics, you have a wire here and a wire there. They go into a
transistor.
They go. Oh, I think I'm a little confused here. Let that thought drop. I'm not sure what I was trying to say.
What I'm hearing is what you're saying is that waves can be integrated through phase conjugation. Is that right? Waves can be integrated in a way that's
yes. The
maybe
word I was searching for,
maybe flexible, or
the word I was thinking of is a transistor. And you give it, a couple inputs, and then you've got this a third signal coming in, and it modulates those inputs. So the circuit, the optical system I just showed you can be seen as like a transistor, except instead of one wire with one voltage, each signal contains like a whole image in effect. And when you're mixing these images in the nonlinear thing, it's like you're building a transistor that works not with single voltages, but with whole images.
Oh, I get it. Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. And if there's a mixture of frequencies, if it's not a what's the word that means light from a laser is single frequency light. If it's not that, if it's a mixture of frequencies, then it could reflect some of them, but not all, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And it also gets a lot more complicated. In the example I showed, there are the same frequency waves. And if you use different frequency waves, then you get different results, equally interesting. But, you know, there's a massive potential in the things you can get out of this basic concept. And using a single frequency for all the waves is a simplified version of all
Yeah.
of the other more magnificent stuff you can get with different things. Requires more investigation. If we knew someone
But
who
it would be sad to in my mind to interpret all of that as though it's a form of transistor. That I see how it's importantly different because it's acting on an image instead of acting on a single scalar value, a voltage. But or to turn it into a memory by putting photographically sensitive stuff inside the glass, right? That's what you really want to do is have that transistor effect change the pathway of light in a continuous loop which sustains itself, right? So the thing that it's acting on is the two input beams, and the thing that it's so that the instead of thinking of it as a fixed function which is altering the relationship between an input and an output, it's just all of that is part of a dynamical process which is creating a resonance that engineers its own construction. It's there was something you said when you were talking about the phase conjugate mirror about a beam entering the region of interference sees the interference pattern as though it's another wave.
yes, yes, because the wave coming in is traveling at the speed of light and it collides with this interference pattern the same way that it would collide with a beam of light.
Yeah, interesting. So that's like if I have two resonators in sound in airwaves and they produce a difference tone, I can resonate with the difference tone, right?
Yeah.
Even though there isn't any oscillator of the difference tone there, right? So
Right.
there's an oscillator of F and an oscillator of F2 or F prime, and the difference tone between them is, let's call that G. So some third oscillator, also a frequency G, can resonate with G because it was the difference tone, even though there is no G there, right?
Right. Right.
And that's really important because it means that it's interacting with the relation. And if that resonance between the difference tone and the new oscillator G was to change its phase, doing phase locking with it, for example, what is it going to change? And it can't change if it changes that means that pushing back on the difference tone needs to change the two sources.
Yes.
But which one? Right? So there's an ambiguity there about which of those two sources are going to give in, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, let me ask this question. Can we, do we know anyone who has a light table that has this equipment on it? It's very basic stuff, you know, there's a laser You need a collimator to stretch it into a beam. And then you need a block of nonlinear glass. Can we demonstrate on a bench what I've drawn in my figures there? And if we got that going, then we could play with that as a start point of what else can we do with it.
Interesting. So, well, I don't know, but I imagine that if it was motivated properly, we could find somebody who did, right?
Yeah.
They
right.
would want to, well, I know that experiment. Why would I want to do that experiment, right? Where are you going to take it from there that takes it somewhere that hasn't been done before?
Yeah, good question. I'm working on it. Yeah, well, I raised this nonlinear optics just to say that there's a dozen different ways we can go with this. We can use ripple tanks with water waves in them, or nonlinear optics, or we can use acoustical waves. You know, there's a million different ways, and the hardest part would be to pick one and focus all our energy on it. And
Yeah.
I'm not really sure which one I would pick.
So my inclination would always be to do a computational simulation first
Mm-hmm.
that uses the materials in the way that we expect them to behave and shows that if it did this, then it would be interesting because.
Yes, right.
And then you can do all of that in numerical simulation. And then if you find something that if you can not find something, because that's the wrong word to use when you're doing simulation, if you can use the simulation to concretize your thoughts around something that would be interesting, then you can motivate somebody to do it. And it sort of doesn't matter which substrate they do it in, right? Do it in light, do it in sound, do it in water waves, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the principle could be demonstrated in the abstract using numerical simulation, right?
Yes. And that would indeed be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well, I may have maybe totally wrong about this, but I have this intuition that I wrote about in that Pans on Wire document about the role of energy and the way that, so if we do experiments, analog experiments with non-living matter, it seems to me they're going to lose energy, like in a way that's going to disrupt the memory that's forming.
Yeah.
And so it's going to dissipate. But if we do it digitally, then we can just pretend that won't happen somehow. We can just write that out of the program. And so,
the thing is, how would you, so a completely different kind of substrate to think about is I've been having a conversation with a guy who does swarm robotics stuff, and he builds big tables with thousands of little mechanical oscillators on them, which are powered. And this is what he calls active matter, right? So you're making stuff out of very large numbers of copies of components which are all the same, but the components are powered, and all they do is they just do that, right? They're just little dots that move around in a little circle. And don't mean rotate, they mean they move around, right? And then you pack them together with the right density, and they form rotating mats. They phase synchronize with the little oscillators next to them, and then the whole thing starts rotating all in synchrony, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But yes, it's the territory that we want to be in is what they call active matter, so that it's not just passive, because that will just diffuse and you lose the energy. But
are these little guys programmable? I mean, these little active swarmer things are.
I think they are basically built to do one thing, and then the research questions are about the conditions under which they self-organize and how they self-organize, and whether they form multiple layers of modularity or things spontaneously, things like that.
What would I search under to read that stuff?
Let me check the spelling of the name.
So far I've got keywords active matter and swarmer.
I put his name in the chat.
Sure.
Seems like it might not be that hard if you could just put a few options in there for the little swarmers. You know, maybe you could get the downward causation as well as the upward causation. Like it might not,
So,
you know.
so I was here's where I would start. It's quite a different place to start, I think. So the first thing Steve, you'll laugh at how basic my inability is to do it, considering how grand my plans are and how basic my ability to actually begin. So, I actually do not yet have a numerical simulation of phase synchronization between two oscillators.
Yeah.
I don't have equations for that. There's a Wikipedia page about it, and the equations on that page are bullshit. They don't do phase synchronization. So if you know, or you know somebody who knows, the maths of phase synchronization, I would very much like to have a simple numerical model in whatever language you like that does that.
Strogatz comes to mind. Have you looked at Steven Strogatz?
I read
So my
Strogatz.
understanding is that you know that this is not a research topic, right? This is known stuff, right? But I don't have equations for it. Now, when you look up phase synchronization, you mostly get the Kuramoto model, but we don't want the Kuramoto model. The Kuramoto model assumes that you have a variable called the phase, and then it just assumes that you have a force which moves the phases together. That's not what we want.
Right.
We want to, it's an oscillator in a simple harmonic motion that's loosely coupled with another that through transferring energy between the two of them phase locks. Now, the equations which are on the Wikipedia page, they have two weakly coupled oscillators. They are correct equations for that. And there's a little GIF. I'll show you the little GIF, shall I? Let me find the little
You're talking about like metronomes on a movable table, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking Steven Strogatz's book Sync, which I have laying around here somewhere. I used to. I feel like he wrote papers on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the key. His whole book is about that. Like his whole book is about oscillators that synchronize.
Sounds like a book I should read then, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, you would love it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, Steven
it
Strogatz.
started screen sharing. Okay, there we go. Coupled
So
oscillators.
this
Okay.
is the Wikipedia page on coupled oscillations. And it has some equations here for coupled oscillators. And they do what this animated GIF does, that you start one of the oscillators going, and because it's coupled to the other one, it transfers a little bit of energy to it, and then that gets the other one going. And then what? Well, now that one's going and the first one isn't, and it transfers energy back again.
Yes.
And in a sense, swings between the two oscillators.
Yeah.
But with those equations, it swings between those two oscillators forever. They do not phase lock, right? So they are equations for coupled oscillators, but they're not equations for phase locking. So,
Yeah, I guess not.
so starting with the basics, that's number one for me. The next thing I want to do is do my how to compute a non-linearly separable function with oscillators. How do you compute XOR with an oscillator? And I know how to do that in theory, but I haven't done a numerical simulation of it. First of all, you represent a variable with an oscillator, obviously, and the value of the variable depends on the phase with which you read it. So the variable doesn't have a particular value unless you know the phase, because it can be either high or it can be low or anything in between, right? But if you know the phase, then that gives it a value. So notice that a value isn't a constant thing, right, that we're used to in computer science and von Neumann architectures, where a signal carries a value for a particular variable. A variable has a value at a particular phase.
Yeah.
Now, if you want more than one variable, you need more than one frequency. So we have variable 1 is a particular frequency whose value is read at a particular phase. Variable 2 is another frequency whose value is read at a particular phase. Okay, so now the difference between them tells you the relationship between them, and that can be used to determine whether they are the same or different at a particular moment in time, again, reading at a particular phase. So the difference between them is a difference tone. If you resonate with the difference tone, that tells you what is the relation between these two variables. And that if they're not the same frequency, then that relation is not going to be stationary, right? It's going to be going in and out of, it's going to be changing as well. So if you want to read it as, are these two variables the same or are these two variables different, then you have to take the absolute of the difference tone. And to take the absolute of the difference tone, you use the octave, which effectively throws away the sign. It's like the octave relationship. When you have a resonator of frequency F resonating to an oscillator of frequency 2F, it doesn't know whether it's which of the two cycles it's in, right? It doesn't know the sign of the oscillator. It loses the sign information, and then that's symmetric. So in order to compute XOR, you need an oscillator which is 2 times the frequency of the difference tone. And the way in which an oscillator of that particular frequency resonates to those two variables will tell you whether they're the same or different. So that's my theory about how to compute XOR with waves, but I haven't done that numerically yet. So then the third step is I want to do a memory which is ambiguous. So you have an oscillator which is going to have information as it's turning. It's information like it's on a continuous loop, which is perturbations to its orbit. And if that resonates with another oscillator that is twice the frequency, then that sort of makes a copy of what was on this loop, folded onto itself like so, so that once round this loop is twice round this loop, right? Which means that it's making a copy of each half is imprinted onto each other half, right?
Yeah.
Which means you must have lost some information, but you've also sort of doubled it up, that there's 2 copies of it instead of 1 copy, right? So you halve the resolution, but you doubled the number of copies. And then when you resonate that back again from 2F back to F, whatever bit of information you had in the original oscillator is duplicated. So if you go around this loop and you put a little beep on that loop like that, when you resonate that with the 2F oscillator, it gets a little beep on that, but it's going round twice for each one of those. And when you resonate that back again, you get the original blip, but you also get an echo. You get the original signal and its ghost because it's been copied by the resonance, right? So that's the basic principle of compression and expansion of the continuous domain by a factor of 2 and back again to the same domain. Then the next step is you want to disambiguate that using another frequency, right? So when that's not a very good memory, It has the nice sort of compression and expansion aspect, but it's not a very good memory. Hi, Ian, you okay? I'm just on a call for a bit. You all right? All right, see you in a bit. You want to have a memory which can get back, well, which one of these two blips is the original, right? Is it the blip or the ghost? Which one is the ghost and which one is the original, right? So to disambiguate that, you take the original signal and this time you compress it into a different ratio. Instead of 2-to-1, you do 3-to-1. And when that comes back, you have 3 blips instead of 2 blips or 1 blip. And you think, well, that's no good. Now I really don't know where it is. But the genius of it is, if I say so myself, one of the blips that corresponds to the 3-way copy overlaps with one of the blips that corresponds with the 2-way copy. And that tells you which one was the original and which one was not. It's like stereoscopic vision gives you back the 3rd dimension that you lost from one-dimensional vision, from one monocular vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you compress it with the octave, you don't know. You lost one of the dimensions. You don't know whether it's this blip or that blip. When you compress it with the 3rd, it's what's duplicated for 3? Triplicated. Is that the right word?
It is.
Sure.
But the two of them together disambiguates the original memory. So that gives you a memory which can be transferred to other frequencies and back again without losing it. Can I tell you the next step?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure.
So the next step is, if I was watching what was happening on the original frequency, what would I see? I would see the pattern disappear from that frequency and then come back again, right? It's like it's a memory which goes away and then comes back. If I was watching on one of the other frequencies, I would see the 2F frequency appear and then disappear again, right? And they would be in antiphase, right? It's like it's in the memory and it's back. It's in the memory and it's back. So what it would appear like at any particular frequency is that there's information which is being lost and then it's somehow coming back again, right? Now we know, because we can see the whole system, that it wasn't really lost. It was just transferred to another frequency, right? So that, done deeper, is my whole principle of how a thought can be gone from your mind and then come back, or an organism can apparently have an end to its lifetime and then come back, right? That the next generation in the life cycle is that this pattern of activity that you thought was so precious appears to be gone, but it isn't really gone. It's just pushed into other frequencies that you're not paying attention to. It's pushed into very high frequencies right down in the DNA at the molecular level, and it's pushed also into very large frequencies in the environment that are almost, they seem like they're sort of environmental constants, but they're not really. And the interaction between those frequencies recreates the organism in the next generation. So from starting with that simple memory that just goes from F to 2F plus 3F and back again to F, if you make that deeper, you have a whole construct of a memory built possibly in multiple frequencies in itself, which can be apparently disappeared and then recalled again, back again.
So that's beautiful. So if I'm getting that picture right, then Richard, it's the selection of what to record in memory is just a selection that's because of what?
Yeah, you don't need to do any selection. I don't do selection.
Which resonant? Well, I don't,
selection is for losers.
Yeah, right? I don't mean that's not quite what I meant. But I mean the choice of what is recorded in memory, what becomes a part of the system and what doesn't, is a choice that's made when these oscillators interact, right? That some references are found and some are not found.
It's just what resonates and what doesn't.
Well, hold on. But there are many thoughts that we have that we lose. So we had a resonance there because we had a thought, and then we lost it. So there is some sort of like winnowing. There's some things that make it into the lower levels, and some things that don't
Don't
make
think about it as a recording. Don't think about it as a decision to decide what to retain and what to discard. That's selectionist thinking. I don't do any selectionist thinking.
I
I
know,
like
but
this.
that's the significance. But that's what determines cognition, right? That's what
Nope.
becomes significant. Like that's what turns into a working system versus
No.
something that records everything. Also seems to lose everything. So
You
there's
can't
something.
you can't record everything because it resonates with some things and not with everything. And all it means to be a living entity is that you are in resonance with your environment. So that original frequency F, right? I was drawing it as a little circle, like a little loop of tape, right?
Mhm.
If that's connected to something which is irritating it or stressing it, right? That will create ripples which move into all the other harmonic frequencies that it's connected to. And if those harmonic frequencies push back in a way that enables it to alleviate that stress with the environment, then that's sustained. If they create more stress with the environment, then it creates more stress with the environment. And the patterns that you are able to see are just the patterns which repeat. If you see a pattern which repeats, a pattern which is sustained in interaction with the environment, what does that mean? It means that pattern resonates with me as the observer, right?
Mhm.
Now, for stupid observers, they might think, I don't see any pattern there. That just looks like noise to me. That just looks like a system that is irritated or stressed or jangling around in interaction with the environment, right?
Mhm.
But if you were tuned into it, then you might be able to see some pattern there. You might be able to register that as it's remembered something, it's responded in a particular way, it's taking an action. But those are concepts which are meaningful only because you were able to model them, and you were only able to model them because you're resonating with what it is doing.
Can I switch to a total non sequitur, which may or may not be connected? I've been watching videos of slime mold. You know, slime mold, those
Yep.
little individual creatures that all band together and they go hunting through the environment, and they expand outward with a million little tendrils all going in different directions. Some of them thicker, some of them thinner, some going left, some going right. But if you watch it in time, it's pulsing.
Yes.
So it shoots out a pressure wave that distributes itself among all the tendrils, and then there's an echo that comes back into the body of these things. And I'm thinking maybe setting up a resonance in such a way that if one of the tendrils found a way through to a farther space, then the forward rush of stuff in that tendril will be reflected with a backward rush. And if you're going forward and backward and forward and backward, it's almost like inside the body you have a map of what's out there in the extremities expressed in the form of this resonance back and forth.
Yes.
So
Which
if
communicates the information from one part of the periphery to another part of the periphery, right?
Yeah, and to analogize with what you're talking about, if one of these tendrils is twice as big as another one, then back in the cell body where they merge and interact, that you potentially get this kind of resonance. What you're talking about, that you've got the slower resonance here and a faster resonance there, and they interact with each other, create a difference resonance or whatever. I'm just putting that thought in there, mixing it up. I don't know where it's
Yeah,
going.
that's right.
Well,
I think that the
that's what
pulse in the slime mold is really important. It's
Yeah.
its ability to do collective action,
Yes.
information integration and collective action absolutely depends on that pulse.
Yeah. Fascinating phenomenon. Yeah.
And you see the same thing. So with ant colonies, they show you this, the colony making a decision about which path is shorter and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And watch the video of at first the ants are taking all of the paths at random, and then after a while they follow one particular path and it's the shorter one, right?
Yeah.
They don't show you is that if you run the video a bit longer, they all just stop for a while and then they all go again.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is
And
that?
ant colonies have the same kind of pulse.
Oh,
So
it's the pulse. Ah, yes.
yeah, they have an activity cycle that's like 20 minutes long or something where they're all just busy doing ant things and then they all sort of rest a bit and then they all do it again.
Huh. Interesting.
And it's my conjecture that if they didn't have that, ant colonies would just be some ants.
Yeah. Right. Well, interesting ideas, but we're still kind of grasping at very vague straws here. I wish we had like some concrete base that we could start steering towards. I don't really feel it.
Yeah, true. So those the steps that I was talking about in that long monologue I did, I would want to I imagine my vision is that they build into a model of something that is recognizably cognitive. And it might not seem like they are steps on the right spectrum for that, but I think that they are. That the difference between, what I sketched out so far is that it acts like a memory, but the difference between memory and learning is not is important, but it's not so technically difficult, right? The difference between memory and learning is that learning does memory with generalization. And when you have that kind of compression and expansion, you're bound to have generalization. Generalization is essentially just false memories, right? It's like I'm remembering something that didn't happen. That's what generalization is, right? So when you have that compression and expansion, you get that for free. And the next thing is, how do you get from a system that has memory and learning to a system that does adaptive behavior? So that step is that the way in which stress changes the dynamics of the system means that its future behavior is less stressed. Right. So that's it's almost tautological, right? That if I have a physical system which is slightly plastic, when I stress it, it gives way. Which way does it give way? It gives way in the direction that it's less stressed, right? That it just gives up a little bit, right? But when you do that kind of giving way in a system which is doing that compression and expansion, that gives you a giving way which looks like it's anticipating, right?
Yes.
It's not just responding to the forces that are acting on it now. It's responding to the forces that have acted in it in the past.
Yes.
But the
It's
way in
really
which it's
better.
responding to them is just a kind of giving way. It's just a kind of stress reduction. But that's all you need for it to look like an adaptive behavior.
Yeah.
In fact, that's all adaptive behavior ever is. It's just that when you couch it in terms of sensors and actuators and memories and decisions, it seems like it's more than that, but it isn't really.
Yeah. Well, that maybe I'm gonna have to look up this phase synchronization. It's Stephen Strogat's sync.
Yeah. And he wrote a bunch of papers too. I mean, he kind of made himself the guru of phase synchronization.
Well, I ran into his work in Scientific American, Strogatz and Stewart, back in the 90s, I think. and they're talking about cycles in animal locomotion and how four-legged creatures are like four coupled oscillators, and three-legged are three coupled oscillators, and so forth. And all of the gaits, like the various gaits of a horse, they can be explained in terms of modes of oscillation of four coupled oscillators. That's where I ran into Strogatz.
Totally.
Oh yeah, the expander graphs. I don't want it to just be Kurimoto models on graphs. It has to be something more basic than that, right? So the Kurimoto model just says, I've got two oscillators of the same frequency. Their phases start off different. Because they are weakly coupled, their phases move slowly towards each other.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
you're imposing that on it.
Like an epiphenomenal model, right? It just writes down what you observed.
Right.
But a mechanistic model of phase synchronization, I think it actually involves a reconfiguration of the internals of the system, right? So you, like the drawing that we saw in that GIF of two pendulums, two simple pendulums on a shared string.
Yeah.
I don't think they do phase synchronization. The reason that the demos use two metronomes on a wobbly board is because each metronome has internal degrees of freedom that you're not looking at that enable it to a little bit of wiggle room for it to change its phase.
Change its phase, because when you rock its base, that moves the pendulum.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, can I tell you something that I've been playing with some metronomes?
Yes.
And they did not behave as I expected them to. So I got a couple of metronomes and I put them on a wobbly board. My wobbly board, full disclosure, it's not on rollers, it's hanging, it's suspended, right? So that it's very sensitive, right?
Yeah.
Put a couple of pendulums on it with a reasonably fast frequency. They start off out of phase. They're not exactly the same frequency because they never are. And they phase very quickly and everything is happy. And I said, great,
but they snap into, like when you move the thing, it snaps into, you can put it in between, but did you snap them to the same frequency?
Sure, but they're still not the same frequency.
Yes, of course, right. Yeah, all right.
Even if only because the spring isn't wound the same tightness, right?
Yeah, sure.
You get a metronome at a particular, 120 beats, and you wait a couple of minutes and it starts to slow down, right? So it doesn't, even though they are 46 pounds each, I might add, they still don't keep time properly, right?
Oh.
Anyway, but you put them on the wobbly board and they phase lock straight away. No problem at all. Okay, great. This is going good. Let's try some different frequencies. Try some slower frequencies, or, a bit slower, it's okay. You go too slow, it takes a really long time. It's like longer than I'm willing to wait. It doesn't look like they're going to phase synchronize at all. Let's try some fast frequencies, because, the faster the frequency, it seems like the quicker they phase lock. I think perhaps just because the faster frequency is letting more energy out of the spring.
Yes, right.
Force between them, right?
Yeah, it's higher energy.
They go faster, and guess what happens? They go into antiphase. I'm like, what the fuck? So there's a particular frequency at which they switch from going in phase to going antiphase, and it's not just failing to synchronize. No, they antiphase. They antiphase lock. Yeah. I think, well, that's fucking weird. I wonder what happens if I do more than two, right? Because more than two when they're in phase, you know what will happen. More than two when they're anti-phase, what happens now?
What if you change the length of the string that they're hanging from?
Yeah, I wonder. I wonder if there's some resonance in whether the board is able to pick up some different tones and not others. But I still don't understand why it would be anti-phase. So I put 8 metronomes on my wobbly board, and at the fast frequency, they all tick at different times. It's like they're filling the phase cycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's not expected.
No, it's not expected.
Like
So what I wanted to do was the octave and have them resonate in the 2-to-1 ratio. And it's like, oh,
Yes.
like, fuck, I can't even get them to phase synchronize at 2 different frequencies yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet it's the oscillation of the strings that the thing is hanging from.
Yeah. So what would the relationship be? So if I can try really short ones and really long ones and see if
I
that.
had a way to like adjust it until you found, until it
Yeah.
changed the figure, maybe.
The only clue I have is that when they are anti-phase locking, the metronomes, they tend to twist.
Mhm.
Like they sort of they jiggle around a little bit on the board.
Throw another dimension in there.
Yeah.
Like, because they're throwing this weight back and forth, they're also creating a torsion that way, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if there's a clue there about what's going on that but it was very confusing and frustrating, and I played around with it for a few weeks, and then I just stopped because I was confused and I didn't know what to do next.
Yeah. Well, I suspect we're going to have to do a bunch of experiments like that with different media, and have that same experience until we latch onto something that seems to be working. So, well,
I wanted
I'm
to
afraid.
use them to calculate the octave, right? But it's like, shit, I don't know what the equations are for phase synchronization. Okay, fuck it. Let's just get some metronomes. They do phase synchronization. Like,
Yes.
I need to know what the equations are,
To
right?
be said for that.
And now I can't do the octave for a different reason.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I'm sorry, I have time constraints. I'm going to have to depart. But I think even though this is kind of vague and fuzzy, I think this is a good idea. We need to condense some ideas into something more solid and meet again another time. I think.
Yeah. I promised Charlie that I would write down a sort of very high level plan of work, right? Which is basically, what are we trying to do and what are the steps involved in doing it?
Yeah, that's a big question. I have
From
trouble
a
with
conversation today, it's clear that we don't know what it is we're trying to do, let
Right.
alone do it. Right.
Right.
But I promised Charlie that I would try and write that down anyway. So that's still on my to-do list.
All right.
Steve, I think it would be valuable if you were able to articulate what it is you want to do with the phase conjugation mirror.
Yes.
Not just to reproduce that experiment, but like, why do you want to do that? Where does it go next? Why is that important?
Right. Yeah.
Great to talk to you today.
All right. Good to see you guys. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Let's reconvene in a couple of weeks and keep sharing. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for organizing this, Charlie.
Absolutely. Okay.
Bye.
All right. See you
Bye,
later.
guys.